Good morning, and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. We are located at 1563 Main Street in Peckville. I am here with you every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. to provide landowners valuable information you need regarding the natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. And if you are interested in landowner information, this is the show for you. I represent landowners and only landowners for such items as gas leasing. I've talked recently of doing a lot with amendments and modifications where a gas company wants to come in and modify or amend, sometimes even extend your existing lease. Doing a lot of that work now as more of that has come around. Doing a lot, as always, with the royalty deduction issue. If you are having deductions taken from your royalty check and you want to find out, and do I believe that those deductions are being properly taken, I do a free confidential evaluation for anybody. You can contact the office directly to learn more about that at 570-307-0702. Also, doing pipeline agreements. I have dozens of pipeline agreements right now. We're representing clients all across the state of Pennsylvania in negotiations, working out the terms, maximizing both the financial benefits as well as the terms and the language that are in the agreements themselves, and doing more and more with estate planning on behalf of my clients and Pennsylvania landowners as they're transitioning into the royalty phases of their lease. Seeing a lot more of landowners saying, hey, I may have an estate plan, and a lot of people don't even have an estate plan, or they have an estate plan that wasn't done in contemplation of what they're seeing now, and which is a good thing. And a lot of times they're seeing some great activity. They're starting to get their first checks and saying, and making smart decisions, saying, hey, look, let's get some plan in place here. Let me make sure that I'm handling this properly. So doing a lot more with estate planning issues. And another thing of doing a lot of, as this development goes forward, we're seeing a lot of unitization issues that arise. Was your property properly unitized, and is this something where maybe the company maybe missed some acres, and sometimes mistakes are made. So what we do is we look at it. I'll look at it. I'll sit down. I'll talk with you and let you know whether I feel that there is a claim and something worth pursuing, or if this is something that looks to me like it was done properly and we probably don't have a claim to assert. And so it's about getting that evaluation, getting the idea. What are you looking at? Do you have a claim here? Is this something that's worth making more of an investment to challenge and to fight? And I would say, when we make that decision of, hey, let's move this forward, there's a strong percentage of time where actually there is some sort of change. But the key is understanding that that's not going to happen every time. So sometimes the evaluation is pretty easy. Sometimes it's more complex, but I can assure you we are seeing, and not across the board by many different companies, we're seeing errors and issues with respect to unitization. Are the proper acres unitized? Did they miss any acres? What's going on there? So that's another thing we're doing a lot more of recently. And of course, any contracts related to the development of oil and gas. And I'm going to talk today some about a storage lease agreement. We're going to finish up on some pipeline issues that I started last week, but I want to talk about a storage contract here today. So a reminder, we're here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m., and if you need representation, if you have questions on the royalty issues, you want to learn more, you can always contact me directly at 570-307-0702. That's 570-307-0702. I am Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, and we're here again every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And if you missed today's show, or you're just catching it now and this is the first you've heard the show, what I do is, I've been doing the show since August of 2010, so we archive the shows. That means we make them available on the websites, so you can go back to pagasleaseattorney.com or pipelineattorney.com, check out the prior shows, and today's show We're going to post that up tomorrow, so it'll be available so anybody can go the next day. So if you can't catch it Sundays from 8 to 9 a.m., or maybe you're in the listening area today, but you'll be outside, you're not really from here, or you go away back to your, maybe it's a vacation or a residential property or not a residential property. So this is a situation where you can have the opportunity, go to pagasleaseattorney.com, go also to pipelineattorney.com. We have, I think we're about 150 hours of radio shows that are available for you to listen to. So you can go back and, no matter what the topic is. I'm not going to talk a ton today about the royalty issue because I've been talking about it so much in recent shows. And I know we'll be talking about it more as things develop. But if you're a landowner out there, one of the biggest issues facing you is, your royalty checks. If you're going to be getting royalty checks or if you're already receiving them. Are deductions being taken for items such as gathering, transportation, compression, and potentially others? So it's very, very important because these deductions are often quite substantial. So you want to make sure that if you're having deductions taken, that those deductions are being taken properly or they're authorized under the terms of your oil and gas lease. So that's something, again, I do free, confidential, no obligation to even do anything. I'll look at your lease, and even if you're not getting a lease, I'll look at it, and I'll explain to you whether you fall into this potential or this active class action or arbitration case or motion to intervene. We'll give you that information. What you do with that from there is entirely up to you. But we want to make sure that you're in tune to these issues, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, again, this isn't going to be the show today, but go back to pagasleaseattorney.com. You can check out, there's a lot of written materials there all about this issue. You can also go and listen to the prior radio shows. There's several hours of shows dedicated to these issues, so you can find them at pagasleaseattorney.com and also pipelineattorney.com. So, okay, today's show, we're going to talk about first, in the first couple segments here, a staging area lease. A staging area lease. Now, this is something that a lot of landowners aren't ever going to be presented with, but as I say often, these issues are intertwined. Whatever type of agreement you're presented with, there's very often common issues that you're going to have to look at and deal with. So I had a client who's been a long-time client of mine. I think we even did his gas lease. We did some other pipeline work. There was a well pad that was partially on his property, so represented them in that as well, and negotiating those terms. So there's been a lot of work that I've been involved with this client over the last probably 4 or 5 years. So the client sends me, gets something last week, and he says, hey, Doug, will you look at this? I have a new contract that the gas company has came and presented me with. And of course, the answer is, yeah, sure. Go ahead and send it in. Let me take a look at it and see what we got here. And is this something you're interested in pursuing? Can I help you out with it? Is this something that you need my help with? So go ahead and send it in. So in this particular case, he sends in the contract, and it's called a staging area lease. Well, what does that mean? Well, generally, if you think about a staging area, that's going to be an area where a gas company or a pipeline company is going to go ahead and they're going to use that as a small base of operation. Now, not their main base typically, but they may get their equipment ready there. They may store equipment there. They may use that as a hub to meet and pick up, other workers and stage their operations. A lot of different things that they can do there. So this is a staging area lease. So now we know that it's going to be something that's certainly going to have activity, and it's something that they're going to be storing materials, and you're going to see, truck traffic, things like that. So it's important to you understand, okay, what is this about? What do you want to do? What is this staging area really all about? Because if you think about it, you can have a gas company staging area, you can have a pipeline company staging area, and these two companies may use these staging areas in quite different fashions. So with any agreement that we look at, any agreement, we want to try to identify what to expect. What are we going to see moving forward in the future? So when you say company a staging lease, let's talk about that. What do you want to do? Just generically, let's talk in general, because no matter what is said to you, what's in the contract, what's ultimately on the document should you sign, is what's going to dictate the future. However, these discussions are important to have a realistic understanding and expectation as to what is going to occur in the future. Then also, as you discuss, what are you going to do? How are you going to use this staging area? Then you say, okay, well, if you're telling me that you're only going to store materials here, or if you're telling me that you're not going to store materials here, but you're going to use this to meet and collect and be prepared for the operations for the day or the week or whatever the case may be, can we limit the terms of the agreement to reflect what your intention is? I say that, these issues are often intertwined. As a general principle, whether it's a gas lease, a pipeline agreement, a staging area, a water agreement, any type of agreement, the company is going to want to have as much flexibility as possible. The landowner is what? Well, they're not going to want to have that flexibility. They want to know what's going to be done, and we want to eliminate surprise. So we want to find out, company, what do you want to do, and then how can we kind of hold you to what you want to do? If you're telling us that you only want to store pipes here, then why do you need language in this agreement that says you could build a building on the property? If you're telling me you're not going to put a building on the property, if you're not going to construct any facilities on the property, then why do you need to have that option in your agreement? Let's get it out of there. Well, sometimes then the company says, well, we may have a need in the future that we don't see now, so we need to keep that in there. Well, that's important because maybe you don't want to have anything above ground or any structure on the property. Maybe if there's a building there or some sort of surface structure, maybe you're going to have assessment of taxes on that structure. So maybe your taxes are going to go up. Well, now who's going to pay for that? Then we also look at how much money are you getting for this agreement? Is this worth it to you? If you're only getting, $1,000 or whatever, a few $100s, and you're running the risk of taxes going up, is this something that you want to do? Also, if there's something that may have an above ground structure on your property or a building, is this worth it? Are you getting enough money to justify this? Because maybe you don't want to look at this gas or pipeline company building in the future. So we want to look at every angle that we possibly can. We want to find out what does the company want to do, and then we want to try to limit these operations as much as possible. I say all the time that these agreements come to compensation, but then also the best possible terms. So we also want to really understand the compensation. How is this compensation going to be structured? When is this agreement going to end? How does it terminate? When does it begin? Is it an option agreement where the company agrees with you to enter into this agreement today, and maybe they give you $100, maybe they give you $500, maybe they even give you less than that, and say, well, we have 2 years to decide if we want to use your property as a staging area. Well, is that worth it to you? And then a real big question, obviously, is how much of the property do you want to use, and exactly where can you operate? Those are other, very, very important questions. And those are questions that you need to have answered, and typically you can get answered. But if you don't ask for these terms, and you don't ask these questions, you don't ask to document what these responses are, to draft this agreement to make sure that the company doesn't have more flexibility than what you want to offer, if you don't ask those questions, you're not going to get those in the agreement. So when we come back from this break, what we're going to do is I'm going to explain to you, I'm going to tell you what this agreement was and how it was offered. And quite frankly, I felt that this was maybe the worst agreement that I had ever seen a client offered. Now, it's not that it was something that was going to impact their whole property, but by the terms of the agreement, the terms themselves, and you're going to see, I thought, geez, this may be the worst agreement that I've ever seen handed to a landowner. And we get back, I'm going to explain why. You're listening to Doug Clark and All Things Marcellus, and I hope that was a heck of a tease, and we'll keep you on here for the next segment. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. And a reminder, we are here every Sunday from 8 to 9, and then we archive these shows. So you can go back to my websites at pagasleaseattorney.com and pipelineattorney.com. Check out the prior radio shows. We have them all archived. I think we're at 150 hours roughly of radio shows. Been doing the show recently, just the last few months on the news stations. But before that, doing the show since August of 2010. So there's a lot of information available. And on the websites, pagasleaseattorney.com and pipelineattorney.com, it's not just about the radio show. We have, the pipeline sites doing so much pipeline work. I think at this point, we are close, if have not surpassed, that I've negotiated pipeline right-of-way agreements with over 50 different companies across the state of Pennsylvania. I say that a lot because, I'm kind of, I guess, the reality is I'm pretty proud of that. We do a lot of landowner representation. We understand, I understand what companies will agree to, what they won't agree to, how to negotiate these agreements to maximize the best benefit for the landowners. And so, whether I'm involved or whether I'm not involved, if you're considering or you're approached or you want to learn more about pipeline right-of-way agreements, you need to go to pipelineattorney.com, check it out, and just learn. We're about trying to make sure that everybody's informed. Obviously, I make my living from representing landowners, but I can't represent everybody, and we want to make sure that everybody is informed, is up to speed, has some of the best information available. And you can get that through the websites, pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com, prior radio shows. And remember, I'll say this often, I'll keep saying it, if you're going online, please make sure that the information that you get and you're relying on, if you're relying on this information, is current and up to date. I know myself that shows that I did back in 2010, 2011, some of them have nowhere near the same relevancy as they do today because the market has changed so much. This whole process is evolving drastically. I've been told, we hear these things and we hear all pipeline agreements and people are signing $10, $15 a foot. My neighbor signed at 50 or my neighbor signed at 100. I've had pipeline right-of-way agreements where people sign for literally hundreds of dollars per foot. But the key is to understand that those are not the norm. And what is your situation and where do you stand? And for you listeners out there in Western Pennsylvania, boy, there's a big part of me. I'm from Armstrong County. Man, I wish I could get back there more because people are being taken advantage of out there so much where they're relying on, because people entered into these agreements for many, many years at low compensation rates. Well, that's fine when we're talking about this gas coming from these conventional wells, but now we're talking about big money gas. We're talking about bigger pipelines. There's a lot more involved here than what there used to be involved. Bigger rights of way. We're talking about, much larger easements, more lines, bigger lines, more flexibility in these lines, big companies coming in to install these lines, national pipeline companies. And you need to understand that this market isn't the same as the market when you were just signing a pipeline right-of-way agreement many years ago when companies were approaching you to get some of that local gas from these low-producing wells to market. And it kills me. And I'm pretty excited because we did get we've seen some major movement in the case where a company started like $15 and they used that line. Well, that's what we paid everybody. And you call them out, you say, hey, look, just because you took advantage of everybody before this doesn't mean you're going to take advantage of this person. And this number has risen by more than 3 times what the start was. And they said, well, please, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. We don't want other people to know. Well, that's the thing. Communicate. Get that information out there because this money is available. Don't leave it on the table. Whether it's me or somebody else, get quality information. Get representation. Get somebody who's experienced and knows what they're doing. Get some assistance because you need to understand your circumstance. I do a lot of pipeline agreements in Susquehanna in Bradford County and Wyoming County. And boy, they're fun calls to get because there's so many times where the landowner has a lot of leverage. And the last thing the company wants to do is let you know that. So we're really having some exciting times working on some of these pipeline right-of-way agreements. And I pride myself, too, of doing it efficiently to make sure that we understand what your leverage is, what your options are, how to maximize them, and if this isn't something that's going to work, let's get in and get out and not give you a big legal bill. One of the things we're also very proud of is our testimonials on the website and our client retention. And I know that, how do you get these things and how do you retain your clients? Well, it isn't just about, how do I do this? How do I do this? It's about treating people properly. And when you treat people properly and you work and you're honest and you're upfront and you work hard for people, people will say, hey, that's the guy who I want to represent me. That's the person who I want to assist me. So we take a lot of pride in how we do things. And if you do things the right way, if you're upfront and honest, you're not sitting there just getting no results and handing over legal bills. If you're doing that, who's going to ever hire you again? So, the idea is not just, how do I get more business? The idea is let's help people. Let's get the best possible agreements. And you know what? Everyone's going to benefit. I'm going to benefit because I've done a good job. And if you need something in the future, you're going to come back to see me. You're going to benefit because your lawyer did a good job. You maximized the agreement, you got potentially more money, and you got better terms, and you're going to be satisfied. And you know what? The company's going to do okay also. So just remember that, whether it's me or somebody else, please, anytime you're confronted with any agreement, more than ever, it is important that you get assistance from somebody who understands the agreement, who's done this before, understands the market, and can maximize your situation. You don't want to walk out of this with a big legal bill and no results. If you don't have leverage, you need an honest, straightforward conversation from your attorney. Hey, look, you're limited in your leverage. Let's do the best we can and get in and get out because, say, for example, the pipeline's allowed under the gas lease. We're not going to be able to drive up the price. Let's get the best terms and provisions. Let's protect you in every way we can. Let's make sure they can't go beyond what they're allowed to do in the gas lease without getting a separate agreement. And let's get you in and out of here in a nice, efficient way and a good price and a good result. So that's what you need to look for. That's what your attorney needs to look for, and that's what you as the landowner need to look for. And it's really tough. It really is tough. You're a landowner, you get this agreement. If you haven't seen these a ton of times, or maybe you've seen one or two, there's a lot of information that's available out there, and assessment of leverage is very difficult at times if you're not used to it. Okay, off my soapbox. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. We're here every Sunday from 8 to 9, shifting back to, it was a heck of a tease, so we're coming back to the staging area lease. Okay, I left that first segment saying, this staging area lease was one of, if not the worst agreement that I've ever seen presented to a landowner. Now, let me say, not because it didn't offer a lot of money, but the combination of everything. And when I read this agreement, I scratched my head and said, I literally cannot believe that a company today would approach a landowner and present this type of agreement. I can't believe it. But it tells you and it tells me that they're still getting people to sign things like this. And you need to be informed. You just say no to something or you work on it. But you can't sign something like this, and I'm going to explain why. So, okay, the landowner gets a staging area lease. And it's one page. I have it sitting right here, holding it in front of me. Here it is, one page. It says the names of the parties. Then it says, for in consideration of $2,700. $2,700. Paid in hand. You acknowledge that you received this. And it's for a staging area for the purpose including but not limited to, always watch out for that, including but not limited to the placement, operation, storage, and movement of drilling rigs, tanks, equipment, that's a very, very broad word, equipment, supplies, what are supplies? Materials, another super broad word, and appurtenances. Related to oil and gas exploration and production. And, okay, so oil and gas exploration and production and pipeline activities in Susquehanna and Wyoming counties. I hope that came across properly and how I wanted it to. This is what we call the granting clause. So for $2,700, this landowner was asked to agree to allow an area of the property, we're going to get to this, to be used as a staging area. Remember at the beginning I talked about what is the staging area and what could that mean? Well, in this case it says for the purposes of, now remember, including, but not limited to these things. Including, but not limited to these items. If it just said including these items, this would be unbelievably broad. But it even goes further to say including, but not limited to. So, including, but not limited to the placement, operation, storage, not just the staging area, storage, movement of drilling rigs. Those are going to be very big trucks with very big equipment. Tanks. Equipment. Just the general word equipment. Supplies. Well, what are supplies? What are they related to? What is a supply? Then it goes materials. Remember, this is including but not limited to. This is, in my opinion, essentially anything that you can fit on this property. And appurtenances. Related to oil and gas exploration and production and pipeline activities in Susquehanna and Wyoming counties. $2,700 staging area that you can put anything that you can think of relating to oil and gas exploration and production and pipeline activities in 2 counties. You've now said your area can be a staging, and I don't even like using staging, storage, anything in the world for 2 counties. That's what you're granting here if you were to grant this agreement. That is amazing. Amazing. I cannot believe what they're asking here. You are giving up your property where they want to operate, but you also are opening to, again, building, supplies, materials, all of these things, and not just for your area, not just for your township, but for 2 separate counties. Your property to be used as a storage, staging, anything for 2 counties. Goes on to state, said staging area is located upon the lands owned by the landowner and situated in their particular township. And it states that this lease includes the right of ingress and egress and regress across the landowner's lands. Okay, storage area and the right to ingress, egress, and regress across the land. So that means travel across their lands to and from this area. Now, I mentioned that the price for this was $2,700, the offer. Well, why is that? Well, here goes back to the contract. Said staging area contains an area of 2.7 acres, more or less, and is located on the property substantially as illustrated in the map attached to this agreement. Okay, 2.7 acres, the offer of $2,700 for this staging, storage, can do anything essentially under the sun for Susquehanna and Wyoming counties. Okay, 2.7 acres for $2,700. We're up against the break. Well, when we get back, I'm gonna tell you when this thing ends. So you say, well, hey, big deal, $1,000 an acre. What are they doing? A month to 2 months? stay tuned. You're gonna either love or hate this. I know what my feelings are. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. We're here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m., and we'll be back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. And again, we're here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And if you missed any of today's shows, just go back, check out the websites at pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. We'll have the shows archived there starting tomorrow morning. You can tune into the websites, check out this show. Though we've been on these stations for just a couple months, we've been doing the show. I've been doing the show since August of 2010, so we get about 150 hours of radio show. So if it's a stormy, rainy, bad day, you can go check out some more shows and tune in for some. We are indexing them. We're getting those indexes all finalized, so you can find a show that's interesting to you, something that you're very concerned about. And, as opposed to, if you're not interested in leasing, but you're interested in pipelines, a bunch of pipeline shows, and definitely check them out. Often I'll get a client will call in and they'll say, hey, do you mind, can you direct me to some of your pipeline shows? And we'll tune them into that, and we'll give them the link and say, here, check out this show or that show. Maybe it's a Western Pennsylvania landowner. Say, here's a good show for you. Or a Susquehanna County landowner, here's a good show for you. Direct them to what might be an interesting show for them and their circumstance. Same thing like estate planning, that type of thing. Direct you to what's a good show and get some additional background. And look, you never have to call me. Go check out the websites. Get informed. Get good information. We want you to be informed. An informed landowner will make a good decision. That's critical. Okay, I'm talking about this staging area lease. And maybe you can tell, but I was starting to get fired up, and I was a little tired this morning. But once I started going through this lease, I started building back up my energy, I have to say. It just gets me fired up. I said when the landowner sent this in, again, back to the history, a longtime client of mine, I think I did their lease, but no, we did pipeline work for them. Did some work about partial well site was on their property, and they've been a long time client over several years and really have a nice relationship. And so the gentleman calls and says, hey, they gave me this staging area lease. Will you check it out? And they say, sure, send it up to me. He faxes it up. I read it and I say, I cannot believe what I'm reading. So I give him a buzz and I say, I think this might be the single worst agreement that I've ever seen presented to a landowner. Not that it is, a $5 gas lease for a 500-acre farm and 12.5%. Obviously, that's going to be a much bigger difference in compensation than somebody who is offered a lease with far better terms. But in today's market and what's going on and what is being asked, as far as this being a smaller scale, this agreement is atrocious, absolutely atrocious. So why do I say that? Remember now, it's entitled Staging Area Lease. And I taught that last segment. Every contract, every lease, every pipeline agreement, they have what's called the granting clause, and that's usually right at the beginning of the document. You identify the property, you identify the parties, and then you have your granting clause. What are you granting? What are you giving up? What is the landowner granting to the company in exchange for this financial compensation? Well, in this case, in exchange for $2,700, which we learned the reason why that is $2,700, because the, quote, staging area contains 2.7 acres. So they're offering $1,000 per acre. So 2.7 acres, and you got $2,700. So, okay, that's 1 point. Maybe not so bad. But, like I said, what is going to occur there? And then, how long is this agreement for? Well, the first enormous, red, massive flag that pops up is what can occur on this 2.7 acres. And I don't care what the company tells you, like I talked about before, what do they tell you and what's written in the agreement? Because remember, people out there, a lot of people sign leases with one company or sign pipeline agreements with one company, and now a whole different company owns that lease agreement or pipeline agreement or any other agreement that you have. So across the board, landowners are very familiar with this concept. So whatever this company tells you, first off, doesn't mean that they have to follow it unless it's in the contract, as we know, unfortunately, very well. Also, if they even say, hey, this is how we're going to use this agreement and this is what we intend, and maybe they were going to do it that way, well, maybe they've sold or assigned or transferred this agreement to another company. Also, something to think about, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I'll touch on this. What rights are you giving this company under the agreement, and can they transfer these rights to another company? Can they transfer all of the rights? Certainly. Can they transfer part of the rights? So we have this 2.7 acre area. Is this now going to be a hub, an area that's going to be used for development, and I'm going to talk about it again, in 2 counties, and not just the company you're signing the agreement with, but any other company that this particular company that you're signing with wants to give rights to. So if you're signing this agreement with a gas company and they want to let their friend, the pipeline company who's doing work with them, use your property as a staging area, they're allowed to do that. So, okay, let me step back. Again, you're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. And stepping back again, resetting this, the staging area lease. So 2.7 acres. And the payment is $2,700. What are they allowed to do on the 2.7 acres? Problem number one, this is enormous. This is an enormous grant. Again, this is a staging, but you have to watch because pipeline agreements do this. Water withdrawal agreements do this. Water line agreements do this. All types of agreements provide these enormous grants, which you must protect against. You must, unless you're comfortable with it and you need to understand what you're giving up, you need to protect it. So $2,700, 2.7 acres. What are you allowing them to do? It can be, even though it's called a staging area lease, it can be used for a staging area for the purposes of including, but not limited to, placement, operation, storage, and movement of drilling rigs. Remember, storage, operation, storage, and movement of drilling rigs, tanks, equipment, supplies, materials, and appurtenances related to oil and gas exploration and production, and pipeline activities. Remember, pipeline activities. This is a gas company asking for this. They can assign or transfer these rights in whole or in part to a pipeline company. So you think you're doing something with the gas company that tells you, hey, this is what we want to use it for. But it turns out now you got a pipeline company using your property as a staging area for all their operations in the region. Well, you say, well, that's not going to be true. How can you do that in the area when this is just for my property? Well, it says to use your property, again, storage, movement, drilling rigs, tanks, equipment, supplies, materials, appurtenances related to oil and gas production, pipeline activities. Where at? In Susquehanna and Wyoming counties. That's a very big area. You're getting $2,700 for 2.7 acres, and they can use this for all of these things, not just in your township or in your property or your neighbor's property, but the entire Susquehanna and Wyoming County areas. That entire area. So, okay, well, that's fine. How long is this agreement going to go for? We want to know, when's it going to terminate? Well, I got the answer for you. And this is another part that makes me think that this is one of, if not the worst agreement that I've ever seen. So the next part says, how long is this for? Well, to have and to hold until the company, subject to the terms of this agreement, beginning on the date that the agreement is entered into and expiring upon the earlier of the following two things. One, cessation of the company's natural gas exploration and production activities in said counties. Remember, okay. So number one, when does this end? Well, when they stop natural gas exploration and production in Susquehanna and Wyoming counties. Think about that for a second. How long is that going to be? This agreement lasts until they stop production. Production, not drilling, production. So the last well was drilled in Susquehanna and Wyoming County. The last well was drilled. Say that well goes 50 years, and that's the last of production by this company. How long are we talking about? I would say that this is easily over a century, easily over 100 years. So that's step one. How can this terminate? Number one, it would terminate when they stop activities and production, exploration and production activities, not just on your property, but in Susquehanna and Wyoming counties. That's how big. Number two, you said, well, that's one, okay? So it can stop on the earlier of these two things. Number one is stop exploration and production activities in Wyoming and Susquehanna County. Number two is if the company surrenders this lease agreement and delivers that surrender to the landowner at your address. Okay, what does that mean? It means that this agreement for $2,700, they're purchasing the right to use 2.7 acres to do all the things that we've talked about. Essentially anything related to gas and pipeline activities in Susquehanna and Wyoming County for how long? Until one of two things. Until they either say, hey, we're done with this. And the question is, why would they do that if they may ever need it in the future? They've already paid one time. There's no call for a new payment, a renewal. There's no lease term. They pay you one time, $2,700. Why would they ever give it up? There's no need to. Or when is it forced to be turned over to you? Only after the company stops production and exploration, not just exploration, but exploration and production in Susquehanna and Wyoming counties. That could be potentially hundreds of years. And what do you get? $2,700 as a one-time payment. I am Attorney Doug Clark. This is All Things Marcellus, and we're here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. talking about this staging area lease, which is certainly so much more than that, and one of the most disturbing agreements that I've ever had a company or a landowner receive from a company. So, want to go on then and state, okay, well, why are you so fired up over this? Well, there's not much more left of the agreement. The last part of the agreement talks about that the equipment, fixtures, facilities, remember that, placed on the lands by the company shall remain the company's property. And after expiration or surrender of this agreement, the company shall have a reasonable time in which to remove the equipment, fixtures, facilities in accordance with the laws and regulations. So again, even when they're done, who knows how quickly they're going to get their equipment and facilities and fixtures off of your property. That could be another year or potentially even more. And then it goes on to state that this agreement is binding on your successors, your heirs, or anybody else who you sell this property to. And then that's it. That's the agreement. So, okay, why am I all fired up? Well, let me just say one thing. What about liability? What if somebody is injured or there's an accident on this 2.7 acre area? What's going to happen? Well, you're certainly going to be named in a lawsuit. Are you going to be covered? There's nothing in this agreement that's going to cover you. Now, obviously, if you have nothing to do with this accident and this was totally way outside of anything and your involvement, and you might be in a different state, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be sued. That doesn't mean that you don't have to defend that. That doesn't mean that maybe there is some way that some attorney can tie some liability to you by the nature of the agreement. Maybe there was a defect or there were operations that were dangerous that you should have known about and you didn't take care of. All kinds of problems could arise here. just the nature of being named on the lawsuit may require you to hire an attorney and defend this. And I'll guarantee you this, that $2,700 that you are paid to enter into this agreement is going to get eaten up very, very quickly in defending a lawsuit. I'm way over here. I'm going to talk more about this in the last segment. Again, you're listening to Attorney Doug Clark. This is All Things Marcellus. We're here every Sunday from 8 to 9. We'll be back after this break. I'll talk to you some more about this agreement and how I am so troubled by it. We'll be right back. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. Again, we're here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. You missed any of today's shows, go check out the websites, pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. We will have the show, this week's show, up tomorrow, Monday, and you can also go back and check out roughly 150 hours of radio shows and great landowner information on the websites. You can check us out on iTunes. It's 100% free. You type in All Things Marcellus in the podcast section, and you can check out the show there as well. We want to make sure that we're getting as much information as we can out to landowners. And again, can't represent everybody. Be more than happy to speak with you and see what we can do to help you out. But we want to make sure that people are informed. And again, no matter where you are and you want some more information or you want me to look at something, you want to see if we can help you out, you can always give me a call, 570-307-0702. I would be remiss if I don't hit on this quickly. Again, we're doing a lot of work with the royalties. If you're getting royalties and you have deductions that are being taken, I do a free, confidential, no obligation evaluation to let you know whether I feel those deductions are appropriate or they're not appropriately being taken. Not the amount. I can't tell you, oh, yes, these are too excessive. But the idea is we're looking at, under the terms of your contract, do I believe that these deductions are appropriate? And then give you a written opinion, and what you do with that is entirely up to you from there. Also, there's the proposed class action settlement, which it kills me because it keeps getting reported as being approved, and it's not been even preliminarily approved at this point. So it's really important to know, do you fall into this proposed class action settlement involving Chesapeake? So if you are leased to Chesapeake, and even if you are not getting royalty checks, I want to expressly state that again. If you're leased to Chesapeake and you're not getting royalty checks, this proposed class action settlement may apply to you. You need to know. You really need to know. Does it apply to me? What are my options? Do I want to do anything about it? What do I want to do? Again, I'll do a free, confidential, no obligation to do anything evaluation. I want people to be informed. You may learn about it and say, hey, I think this is a great thing. Or you may learn about it and say, you know what? I don't like this. I want to join in this motion to intervene. That's your decision. But it's very, very important that you understand whether this applies to you. And my concern is a lot of people out there, don't think it applies to them, or don't think there's anything they can do about it if they're against it or they don't feel it's appropriate. And then also, many people think, well, I'm not getting royalty checks yet, so what's the big deal? It's probably not even going to apply to me. How much money is it going to be? At least understand where you fit in, and does this apply to you? What you do from that, what you do is entirely up to you. But get the free information, get a second opinion, learn more about it. This thing is critical. This is hundreds of millions, potentially $billion issue. You need to know about this. This is your asset. This is what we think to be your money, and we want to make sure that you're informed. And again, how you handle that is your call. I do those free, confidential, no obligation for any representation whatsoever. 570-307-0702. Call anytime. Represent currently over 160 clients in this situation, over 5,000 acres that we're representing. So love to hear from you. And just to say, we're tuned into this. This is it's a big part of my life to fight to make sure that we're not seeing landowners being taken advantage of in any way that we can try to stop. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. Okay, back to this staging contract. I've been talking about this show, and I want to finish up on some points and say, okay, well, it's a 2.7 acre contract, and they're paying the landowner, offering to pay them, in this case, $2,700. But when you look at this contract, just think about it. This gentleman signed this contract. That 2.7 acres of his property can be used by the company as long as they have production ongoing in Susquehanna and Wyoming counties, which by all estimates are going to be at least 100 years. It's a one-time payment. Couple things. Like I said, God forbid if there's an accident or anything that there's liability or a lawsuit, that landowner is certainly going to be brought in. So hopefully they don't have any exposure to actual liability because they didn't do anything wrong, but just being brought in is going to cost you a whole lot more than $2,700 in legal fees. And that's assuming maybe something only happens once. What if there's a few things that happen? What if the property is damaged or harmed, and what if weighed down at the end when it isn't taken care of, or when it's over, that the property's not reclaimed properly? Think about all the truck traffic that you're exposed to. Think about the eyesore that this staging area is going to be on your property. Think about the fact that this company can assign all or part of these rights to another company. So what if hypothetically their operations were ending in 50 years from now and they assign it to another company or a pipeline company to use in 50 years? Think about that. Think about now you think you're doing something with the gas company and all of a sudden the gas company's using it, the pipeline company's using it. You're exposing yourself to any activity related to oil and gas production, pipeline activity for Wyoming and Susquehanna counties. If there's a building, if there's an increased tax assessment, you're going to be responsible for that. There's nothing in here that says that they're going to reimburse you. If you lose clean and green status for this area, you're going to be responsible for that. There's nothing in here that reimburses you. It is a one-time only payment. One time only. That is it. Remember, it allows roadways, ingress and egress. I mean, you are opening yourself up to an enormous amount of potential activity on the property in exchange for a one-time payment of $2,700. And I'll leave it to you and your accountant as to what type of tax you may have to pay on that. So those are just some things to consider. So you say, wow, this is terrible. Well, it is terrible. But I'll tell you this. I talked to the company. I write the guy back and say, this is, and politely, that this is just not going to happen. There's just no reason in the world that this is going to happen. And in fact, with all due respect, this is one of the worst agreements that I've ever seen presented to a landowner. Just baffling. And when I write this, I know that there's no way that this company can actually rebut what I'm saying. They can't challenge what I'm saying because what I'm saying is completely true. I've never seen anything like it. No, I can't believe this company would present this to this individual. And I get a call back, not from the landman who approached my client, but from somebody at the company saying, well, okay, what can we do to make this work? And so, look, with all respect, this is atrocious. This agreement is atrocious. And essentially, there's an agreement from the company saying, yeah, you know what, you're right. It's a bad agreement. So what can we do to make this happen? And say to me, can you write what you want to have in there? And my response is absolutely not. My clients aren't going to pay me to write your documents for you when I don't even know what you're going to do. And I am going to spend this time and my client's money writing your documents, and we don't know if they're going to be acceptable. We don't know if my client ever even wants to do this. So you know what, company? Respectfully, go back to the drawing board. If you want to present something back to my client, it needs to have term lengths. It needs to be renewed. Think about this as more money, because I've seen my clients paid much more money than what's being offered. Think along the lines of this is for a 1-year term, and if you want to extend it, you're going to have to pay that money again. Think about needing liability coverage here. Think about reclamation. Think about tax protection. Think about liability. Don't send anything back to my client or me unless it has all of those items addressed. And from there, then once you send that to me, we'll look at it and we'll make a decision. My client will make a decision with my guidance as to, is this even worth pursuing any further? client landowner, do you want to continue to incur expenses to work on agreement which you're so far apart on, it doesn't make sense to spend money on your attorney to spend your own time on an agreement that's never going to work out. So company, think about those things. Think about how much you need this agreement, how much you want to have this agreement. So when you come back to us, you bring something substantial, not just sending the land guy out there to sign this terrible, horrific agreement. Don't do it. And the moral of this then comes back to, well, let me jump here first and say, well, I did in the last couple days get a response back from the company, and to a degree, not saying necessarily to an acceptable degree, they've addressed all these concerns. The money more than doubled. There is now a time frame on the contract, and renewals required. There's liability, all of these type of things that we talked about. Now, not saying that they're acceptable, but they're all been addressed. So the starting point is totally different. To finish up then, my concern is people are being presented with these agreements, this type of agreement, and people were signing them. Had this individual signed, he would have lost thousands of dollars, exposed themselves to liability, and really opened themselves up to a terrible agreement. Please, if you're presented with a document, get some assistance. You can contact me anytime, but get some assistance. We're at the end. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. Have a great week, everyone.